Hello everyone, it's Joel Davis with the United Medical Transportation Providers Group, and I want to share with you an email that's actually from about a week and a half ago, and I apologize, Brian, for being so slow to respond. I am digging out from a ton of emails. Now, for those of you who know, if I'm working with you one-on-one, I obviously respond to you right away. But when you send emails for me, my staff, they're going to try to answer most of the emails and questions to the best of their ability. If I'm working with them, they get pushed to a whole different folder that comes directly to me, so I know I can prioritize who I need to respond to. Then there's other emails that if I have time, they'll send them over in a different folder for me, kind of like a suggested if I could respond to them. So I've just been so busy, and I apologize, Brian, for not responding to this sooner, but you sent a great email, and the reason I'm sharing your email is, number one, you kind of give affirmation to some of the strategies I've been deploying, which I want to read because I think that's going to benefit some people, but even more so, your scenario is not uncommon. I see it quite frequently, so I want to address that. So again, for those of you who've sent emails, again, if I'm working with you one-on-one, you obviously know you get responded to right away. For those of you who send emails, if they're general questions, Dan, Charlie, Dawn, they're going to be able to respond to them. If it's something regarding DME or some of the software products, then you're going to have Lisa and Elizabeth. They'll be able to address some of those things. If you're contacting us about youarethebroker.com, Amelia is my personal assistant. She'll be able to answer those questions, so definitely send her a direct email. But let me go ahead and dive into here because I really want to get to the meat and potatoes of Brian's email because, again, many people I've encountered have encountered similar situations. So let me go ahead and address this. He writes, "Hi Joel, I have to say that over time I have become a big fan of yours." Thank you. "I purchased a copy of How to Build a $1 Million Medical Transportation Company back in January of 2018. I've read through it from front to back, and I've highlighted and taken notes in all the sections that have nuggets of great information. Up until that point, I've spent a majority of my working career in the finance and banking industry. I continued in the banking industry up until late 2019, and the thought of starting my own NEMT business became a louder and louder drumbeat in my head. I've been doing tons of research on the industry, watching your YouTube videos, and getting myself ready to launch this new business. Your recent video on your bestmilliondollarbusiness.com website was totally awesome. Love it. I thought you did a great job summarizing what you have been teaching all this time into your 1-hour medical transportation video. Also, I love the 3-part series on Protect Your Business. I know you know your stuff, so you don't need me to validate your thoughts and strategies, but I can attest to your teaching about business structure and building the quote-unquote honeypot, as I've worked with hundreds of businesses as a commercial banker." Love it, Brian. Excellent. Kudos to you, and thank you for reaffirming the strategy. Brian continues, "I know I am kind of rambling here, but I wanted to reach out to you. I've completed a majority of the items to launch the business and feel that I'm about 1 month away from opening the doors. I am super excited and motivated to start operations. I'm very passionate about the service we will provide, as I've seen the critical need for NEMT as a result of my father suffering a severe stroke, and my wife's mother also suffered a severe stroke. Sorry to hear all that. As well, many years ago. The memories I have of the county paratransit service available at the time still give me nightmares today. The service was awful." I can attest to stuff like that. I see it all the time. "I would like to build a company that would provide the highest level service, the type of high level service that I would be proud to provide for my dad and my mother-in-law if I could go back in time." Well intentioned. I can definitely commend and appreciate that. "So where am I today? I believe the last 2 areas where I could use some help are launching the website with consistent logo and branding, and working on securing contracts and service agreements with local healthcare facilities. We could definitely help you with those strategies. I would like to implement your slow, controlled growth strategy. My original plan was to be a driver initially and learn the ropes from an operational perspective. After about 6 months, I could see hiring another driver and purchasing another van, and then possibly hire a second driver and another van 6 months after that. Most recently, a new opportunity has surfaced that is causing me confusion at the moment. A local community bank is interested in offering me a job to come work for them. It would be full-time, possibly part-time, but regardless, I would have some flexibility with work from home options. I was considering taking the job, but I am not sure and at a crossroads here. My wife has expressed interest that she would like to continue moving forward and starting the NEMT business. Joel, do you think it would be possible for us to launch the NEMT business with me in a part-time capacity, my wife in a full-time capacity, and you providing consulting services to guide us through this process? I would love to hear your thoughts and appreciate your time reading this email. Thank you, Brian. Brian, again, I apologize for not making this video and responding to this sooner, but again, I've just been absolutely swamped, number one. But I say that because I know you're interested in launching your business fairly soon, and you're faced with this situation that I'm reading right now. So a couple things to consider. First and foremost, I'm not exactly sure where you're located. If I did, I would probably give you even more targeted and accurate information about things you'd want to take into consideration. In terms of taking a job, starting this business, there is no right or wrong answer, but here's what I would tell you. I know it sounds cliche, but you really need to follow your passion. I know for me personally, the way that I'm wired, I could never go work for somebody else. I know that, and that's just the reality of the situation. I personally could never go be an employee. That's why I value my staff, my team, employees I had in my medical transportation business. In my broker business, we have over 50 contractors, and they bust their butt. That's why I appreciate them so much, because I'm going to tell you, I know I can't do what they do. That's just flat out. I'm wired different. And some people think that entrepreneurship that's more risky, and there's a lot of truth to that. There's more risk, but there's also a lot more reward. I would tell you got to do some serious self-actualization and realization of how are you wired. If you take this job, what is the strategy? Is this going to further your career? You're going to be here for 3 years, 5 years, get promoted to VP and move on and go to this other bank. I mean, what's that trajectory? I don't know what that looks like for you. Again, I would need to have more dialogue and a more in-depth conversation with you. If you're just using that job as a stepping stone, maybe get some extra money, that's a whole different conversation, and that's a possibility. So you can further bolster your finances to have a stronger platform for which to launch your business. I'm open to that for sure. I would like to know more. In order for me to give you clear-cut guidance, I would definitely need more information. You have a great email, and I appreciate it, but no question, I would definitely need to know more. When it comes to the actual transportation business itself, and those of you watching, you've probably picked up in other videos, and I openly tell you, if you're just looking to make a little extra money, develop a little solid or more stable side hustle, as they call it, then I would tell you just go drive for Uber or Lyft. I know they've been slow and shut down with the pandemic, but now that we've emerged, they're starting to pick back up. That's great. If you were just looking to make some side money, you would go do that. Now, Brian, do I think you're doing that? No. I think you want to build a legitimate business. The reason I mention that is because if you're going to build a legitimate NEMT business, there is absolutely no question it's got to be a full-time gig. Now, the good news is your wife, as long as she's going to be actively engaged full-time to at least start the process, the reason why you've got to make sure absolutely that you stay committed to a full-time business for NEMT is specifically, what do I talk about in my material? You definitely want to try to go after dialysis patients. They would be what I call the holy grail of individual customers. If you have a contract with the hospital and that hospital requires you to be available to do discharges anytime during the day, if you're also working with their ED department and you're doing them throughout the middle of the night on the weekends, then obviously you've got to be available. So if you were writing this email to me and it was just you starting the business and you were going to consider going to work for a bank and try to drive on the side, well then absolutely no, that's an absolute deal killer. But because you have your wife in the game and she's going to be your partner, as an absolute minimum, if she is at least able to work on the business full time, we're in the game. We can move forward. But again, I know it's awesome. She supports you and wants you to be able to move forward with the business. That's great. Again, so I really want you to consider, what is the motivation for you going to the bank and getting a job? And I'm all for that. I'm not against it. I'm neither for nor against it. It may be something you need to further promote and build and grow and stabilize your finances so you can further leverage it to further grow your NEMT business or anything else that we work on in the future. That's a possibility. I don't know. But as long as your wife is there to at least, and she's prepared, she has got to be prepared, and she's got to understand that while you're working at the bank part-time, if you are, she's going to be the point of contact. She's going to be full-time. Realistically, where you mentioned a controlled growth strategy. Now, I really want to take an opportunity to talk about a controlled growth strategy, because you mentioned it here, you articulate it. I know I always, mention it in all my resources. I pound that drum. But understand, a slow, controlled growth strategy. Now, Brian, you mentioned in 6 months this and 6 months that. That's great on paper. But you may get into this business, and if the local providers are as bad as you mentioned in your email, they're as bad for your father, and I think it was your mother's, your wife's mother. If the surface is that big, your slow control growth strategy may increase, it may accelerate exponentially. The premise of a slow controlled growth strategy is the systematic reinvestment into your business. Everybody I work with, they know I'm all about you control the capital investment, you control the spending and the cash flow. So when I talk about a controlled growth strategy, it's not going deeply in debt. One thing we've learned crystal clear, if there's one thing that this COVID-19 pandemic did, it left a lot of businesses in the wake. And I'm not just talking NEMT, I'm talking about a host of different businesses and industries, because I work with people in all different types of industries. So those businesses that have been highly leveraged, they became obsolete, had to sell, liquidate everything. So many businesses, NEMT and other businesses, other industries, that have been completely wiped out by this pandemic because no cash flow. And they were highly leveraged, had a lot of expenses. That's why you hear on TV about a lot of these, especially these larger corporations, a lot of them would file for bankruptcy, liquidate, consolidate, form acquisitions and partnerships with other companies, things of that nature. So the controlled growth strategy premise is the systematic reinvestment into your business. You don't get a vehicle, you don't get another person until your numbers dictate your movement and decision making. That's critical. So I want to clearly pound that drum beat again, because Brian, when you say in 6 months I'll get another vehicle, in 6 months I'll get another driver, 6 months after that I'll get another one. That sounds great on paper, but realistically, especially if the local competitors are as bad as you mentioned, then realistically, it may not be 6 months here, 6 months there, 6 months here, 6 months there. It may be within 6 weeks you may need to add another vehicle. And you may need to add another driver. It all depends on what type of cash flow and response with how the business grows. So your slow, controlled growth strategy, the word slow is very much a relative term. So it may dramatically accelerate based on need and demand. I mean, it's just common laws of economics. So that's awesome. That's why I don't want you to pigeonhole yourself here of, we'll start the business, my wife will go full-time, I'll go part-time. 6 months from now, I'm going to hire a driver, another vehicle. 6 months, I'll hire another one. That sounds great on paper, but you may get into this. You may be working part-time, full-time at the bank. You may be working part-time in your NEMT business. Your wife is working full-time. And you may realize in 6 weeks, I better have another vehicle on the road right now in 6 weeks just to keep up with demand for maybe just that one hospital that we're working with. Or maybe you could have a large medical center, rehab, skilled care type facility, they may need, just to keep up with their demand, depending on their size, they may need you to have 2 vehicles on the road. So the possibilities and the scenarios are obviously endless. So my point is, I don't want you to pigeonhole yourself into the terms that I use. Slow, control, growth strategy, absolutely critical. But you don't use that as a reference of, I'm gonna deploy a slow, control, growth strategy. 6 months from now, I'll add vehicle number 2 or vehicle number 3. 6 months after that, then I'll add vehicle 4. 6 months after, that's not what we're looking for. We're definitely going to build, what's going to dictate is our numbers based upon demand and obviously the cash flow coming in. So I hope that clarifies your thinking, because that definitely will directly impact your wife. And that's why I say your wife has got to be prepared for this. That's why I hope she's watching this video, because Brian, if you go take that job, which I'm not against, I'm all for, I'm neither yay or nay. It's all, what is the best scenario? What is the best situation for you, your wife? Do you have kids? How are they going to be affected? What are their ages? Who's going to be watching them? If your wife is going to go full-time, who's watching the kids? Are they in school? Who's going to get them off to school in the morning? The reason why you absolutely want to have a full-time presence, again, you've got to be able to handle your dialysis. The bulk of your work, no question. The bulk of your work would be Monday through Friday during regular doctor's hours, doctor's visits, things like that. Now, but again, you know you're going to have after hours trips for a lot of different types of procedures, hospitals, discharges, things of that nature. And again, especially if you're doing dialysis, you got to be able to accommodate them on Saturdays as a minimum. Sundays would typically be your slowest day. But again, I want to make sure that both you and your wife understand crystal clear. If you take your job and you deploy the strategies, the control growth strategy, you may exceed your own expectations in terms of time frame. Number 2, if you do that, your wife, you say she's going to go full time, she better understand what we're getting into here. Because if this thing takes off because your competitors, your current providers in your area are that poor, your business could really boom rather quickly. I mean, I see it all the time. One thing that, again, I'll go back to one thing we've learned from this pandemic as we emerge from the other side is the ballooning effect. And I talked about this several months ago. We're going to see a ballooning effect. Well, that ballooning effect is in full effect, let me tell you. Because there are some people right now who can't even keep up with it. And yet, ironically enough, we're still in some places where they're slowly moving in their phases of opening, and some businesses are still struggling. It's painfully sad to see, especially the businesses that I've witnessed that have had to close because businesses just basically dried up because of this nonsensical self-imposed procedures that we've done in many areas. But again, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent on that. But Brian, again, first, let me congratulate you. I really do appreciate you sending me this email. I really appreciate the affirmation. I love the fact that you have experiences in financing as a commercial banker, because obviously your experience and your affirmation in the videos I've put out, that means a great deal to me, and I appreciate that. And I will put links to those videos down in the description, or I'll have Stefan do it somewhere on here. So that way, some of you, if you have not seen the videos that Brian is talking about, I definitely encourage you to do that. If there's one thing I want you to learn from me, is I want you to leverage your business. Another thing that we've learned from this pandemic, this pandemic has completely underscored, you do not want to be one-dimensional. You do not want to be one-dimensional. You want to be multi-dimensional. And in so doing, watch those other videos where I talk about shaping your business, protecting yourself from liability, obviously, but systematically growing your, what I call, honeypot. It's absolutely critical. You obviously have to leverage your business. Your business needs to be built so that it is an asset that puts money into your pocket, but you need multiple businesses that do that so that you can obviously make more money, but you've got to leverage time. My honeypot is doing exceptionally well because guess what? The economy is also doing exceptionally well, which further helps me accelerate the rapid growth of my honeypot. And the goal of the honeypot is because one day that honeypot is going to fund you. And there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So again, Brian, in wrapping up, Again, I apologize for my delayed response. I see that this has been here for just over a week, so I'm not sure if you already made a decision after you watch this. Feel free to shoot me another email. I'll leave a note for my people to look out for an email from you, so I could further respond much more quickly. But you need to have a heart-to-heart conversation with your wife. Where are you at with kids? Those need to be of consideration. If your wife, if she knows what we're getting into and she's prepared to go full-time while you're part-time, if the plan is for you to work for another 2 years, further pad the cash reserves, I'm all for that. But what's the strategy? And what are the numbers? What are the strategies? How are we going to know when it's time for you to leave that job, come back to the business, enter the business full-time? A lot of things to consider, a lot of things to discuss. So can you start this business part-time? If you go take that job, technically you can start the business part-time, but if you're going to build a NEMT business and you want to build, grow, and scale so that business can be an asset. This summarizes everything that we've talked about in this video. If you want to build that business to such a degree where it is an asset, it makes you money, it's an asset in your asset column, it helps you fund your show, fund your honeypot, then that business needs to be built in such a way that is a full-time investment. Now the good thing is you got your wife as your tag team partner. That's awesome. If this was just you, I would tell you no, it's not feasible. Now I have other people that, again, this underscores why I want to put this video together. I have other people who aren't married, they're single, or whatever the situation is. They want to do part-time, but now they have to pay, because if you want to build a legitimate business that's an asset, it's going to fund their honeypot, build, grow, and scale, sell for a future profit, then no question, you've got to have a full-time presence, which means if you're working part-time, you've got to be paying other people, no question. So that's going to affect your cash flow, your cash investment, expenditures, all that stuff. These are all things that need to be taken into consideration. So, Brian, again, apologize for the slow response. I apologize for the rambling, even though I don't. But I really appreciate this email. Reach out to us. I'll make sure that my guys know to look out for your email. And I'll make sure that you're on my docket and I'll be able to respond a lot more quickly. So thank you so much. For those of you watching this, if you've watched it to this point, kudos to you. I congratulate you. If you are in a situation like Brian where you're thinking about, do I want to start, do I not want to start, can I start full-time, part-time? You've got to have a full-time presence to build a legitimate business that you're going to make money off of, and you're going to put it in your asset column. You're going to sell for a future profit. If not, just go drive for Uber or Lyft. Just get your steady cash flow, get your little money on the side. I can promise you this. I can absolutely promise you this because I see it so much. If you follow the strategies, if you follow these techniques, there's only one thing I can possibly do. See you at the top.